Latasha Ross, and I am a baker, and I'm the owner of Tia's Arrangements. And today I'm going to read a book to you called Enemy Pie, for my best enemy. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on my best baseball team in town. And it should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good till Jeremy Ross moved right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't invited. He invited my best friend Stanley. Jeremy Ross was on my enemy list, and he was the only person on my enemy list. I never had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like this. He understood enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him, "Tell me how." "Tell me how." "I'll show you how," he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn out scrap of paper, faded writing. Dad held it up and squinched at it. "Enemy pie," he said, satisfied. You may be wondering, what exactly is an enemy pie? I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret. He couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. "I will tell you this," he said. "Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of some enemies." Now, of course, this got me kind of working, my mind working. What kind of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum I've been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play along. I shot basketball until the basketball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients for the enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or how worse yet, what could it look like? But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from the kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad, what was wrong? Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy wouldn't eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, and Dad put on oven mitts to pull the pie out of the oven, and it looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on, but still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or even their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad. He was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me on my job. He talked quietly. This is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary. But it was worth a try. And all I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and he looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner and said, "Hello. You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. We rode for a while and played on his trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the girls in the neighborhood, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we rode over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with Jeremy. It almost seemed nice, but of course, I couldn't tell Dad since he had worked so hard on the enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had one, but he didn't have any room for one. I liked him, so I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back. I threw it and it went over my house into the backyard. When he climbed over the fence to get it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go in?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw the boomerang. And he did have me over for lunch. And he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said. "But hold on." I climbed up ahead of him to tear down the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard game and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and we came out and he found us. Dad made macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think maybe we shouldn't give him the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought the pie out. I watched as my dad cut 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates and a side-by-side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed me one, he passed Jeremy one. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pie like this." It was at this point I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat the enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. It's like poison or something." Jeremy fork stopped before reaching his mouth, crumbled his eyebrows, and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. He said, "I saved his life. I was a hero." "If it's so bad," Jeremy asked, "then why is your dad already eating half of his?" I turned and looked at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. "Good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful. And it was all he said. And I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating. And neither of them was losing hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know. But if I'll ever get an answer. I just lost my best enemy.